everybody. Welcome to Culture by Numbers, where data geeks meet pop culture and we dive deep into ways that marketers, data scientists, and ad tech practitioners can collaborate with brands looking to utilize tools for performance. Today, we have a special guest, Dio Favatas, head of identity and marketing clouds at Tredence, a data science company offering industry-specific data analytics solutions that bridge the gap between insights delivery and value realization by partnering with clients to solve the last mile problem in AI. Dio, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me today, Sunny. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to hear about today's topic because we want to address one of the hottest areas in media and marketing today, which is the balance of identity and personalization in a post-Google apocalyptic world. So, Dio, let's start off by asking, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing marketers today in reaching the right people with the right message?
Yeah, so this is a great one. Everybody strives out there. If you go into those Adweek or Programmatic IO or any of like the marketing conferences, and everybody's like, I'm trying to create personalization at scale, omni-channel journeys, and all this other great euphoria. These kind of like utopia, like should I say, experiences where every touch point is directly tailored to my individual want, interest, and need. And that is one of the things that marketers have been trying to accomplish now for the longest time, especially in the age of digitization. I think there's a prevailing wisdom that needs to be solved for before you can even talk about personalization. And that really is on data collection frameworks. And how do I actually know the individual, let alone the tight fit of that individual to other individuals so I can reach enough scale so I can start personalizing at a scale, right? And a lot of that is foundationally predicated on like the data collection methods. And what we all have heard about, and it's been beaten to death in us, is about the death of cookies, cookie apocalypse. What is Google going to do? Oh my God, the world will come to an end, God forbid, if Google makes a decision. And literally what I try and remind people of is, ITP was first unveiled in 2017. ITP is Intelligent Tracking Prevention. It was created by Safari's WebKit group that creates the Safari browser and also contributes to other Apple-based products in the Apple ecosystem, right? And what they initially set out to do was they were like, there's all of these really nefarious cookies out there, third-party cookies, that are fingerprinting our every movement, right? And I actually applaud them for doing this, because if you think about it, back in 2015 or 2016, if I went on Facebook and I did a post that, hey, my wife's pregnant, or like, hey, I'm about to get married, all of a sudden I'd start seeing ads at scale for tuxedos and diamond wedding rings, and all of a sudden now I'm seeing size 0 Pampers diapers and baby formula and stuff like that. And quite honestly, that's not personalization. That's like borderline creepy, right? And so, what kind of stands all this up is, you've got a tech company that basically said, we need to put an end to a problem of bad advertising and bad marketing. And that has to do around third-party cookies. And I think people were really, really frustrated, only to step back now here in 2024 and say, they actually did a good thing, because it now takes it back and it tells the brands that are actually spending the money on the marketing and advertising that if you're going to create a serendipitous experience and do delightful experiences at scale, right, you should do it in a way that it's an actual value exchange for the customer, right? And so follow suit, governments came out. You had the European Union with GDPR, and then you had the state of California, which is probably just as big as the European Union for that matter, with CCPA and then subsequently CPRA a couple of years ago. And now we have about 21 states, I believe, that have come online with some form of consumer protection right in the digital modernization age, right? And that basically is a telltale calling sign for brands that if you haven't made this front and center, because for your monetization scheme, by putting the consumer first, you'll create a better experience. But if you're not thinking about that right off the bat, we're going to create laws that basically say you need to enforce these kind of privacy constraints. You need to put the governance in place to make sure you can make these experiences great. And fast forward, we still have people talking about what is Google going to do. And then, oh my God, Google's not going to deprecate the third-party cookie, but they're going to do something else to make privacy, safety in Chrome. Like, it's like, no, the cookie is dead. It has been dead for a long time. And by the way, marketers, I hate to break it to you. If you spend a lot of money in North America, right, for the past 5 to 6 years, you've only had 50% of the insight into your consumer. And you know how I know that for a fact? Because Safari makes up 50% of all web and mobile browsing. Like, that's just a reality in North America. Maybe different in certainly different in Asia, largely different in Europe, but in North America, where the big bucks are spent, I think it's $160 billion a year, you've only had 50% of your insight. Not to mention, for those of us like you and I, Sonny, who went deep in programmatic advertising and all the nerdiness of the nerdiness, right? One understands when you've got cookie pools and you try and take your cookie pool and match it to somebody else's cookie pool, there was already somewhere like maybe a 60% match rate. So you were already dealing with that before ITP, then enter ITP, and then subsequently ATT, which was what Apple unveiled for mobile apps. Google actually is unveiling it right now as we speak. So there's companies like AppsFlyer out there that are already trying to get ahead of saying like, okay, now GAIDs are going to be deprecated from the mobile operating system. What am I going to do? Right? You've already had just this tiny little bit of a window, let alone the rise of walled gardens, which are just kind of like, we're not exposing out the user data back out because as a publisher, we're going to protect our users. So you brands got to go figure out how to protect yours. So bringing that back around, we started off by talking about serendipitous personalized experiences, right? Well, as a brand, how do I actually address it? So I don't have these third-party cookies anymore. I don't have a first-party cookie collection strategy. I don't have a lot of customer data. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? And I kind of look at this from two sides of the world of two verticals that actually face a very similar problem. So you've got CPGs, which historically and largely think of themselves as data poor, right? Because they don't have the storefronts. And then you got retailers who largely think of themselves as data rich. But there's actually a bit of a different problem on each side, right? So CPGs that have actually invested in loyalty programs, right? And it may be a smaller part of the population, but there are the most brand enthusiast loyalists that belong to, let's say, like a Pepsi program or a Coke program or this, that, and the other, right? At least you've got first-party consented data. And people are giving you data. Maybe it's not the size of the data that you have of all of your regional grocery stores in the Northeast, but it's your own data. On the flip side, grocers, by and large, maybe some of the more sophisticated ones have loyalty programs. A lot of them do not, or do not have very strong loyalty programs, and are dealing with a lot of point-of-sale transaction data, which that in itself has a lot of noise in it. So we say data rich, data poor. Well, regardless of which end of the spectrum you're on, for any form of data collection that you're doing, you really need to put in a first-party data collection strategy. And there really are two parts of this spectrum that I like to think of, right? As far as going and incrementing up to a serendipitous experience or personalization, brands really do need to make it incumbent upon themselves to create zero-party data collection framework. So what does zero-party data mean? Well, maybe I've got a consented email address, a consented phone number, but how do I get snackable pieces of information, or how do I provide a user snackable pieces of creativity or insight that will draw them to want to give me another piece of information? So imagine I start with that email address and then I put a teaser question out there, maybe wrap it in a funny emoji, unlock an Easter egg, tell me how old you are, and what do you like to eat for dinner, Mr. Foodie, you know? And now you're starting to increment a profile, and you're starting to do this across all of the profiles that you have so you can strengthen the attributes associated with the person, right? But even before that, for most of the clients that I actually work with, are basically like, I really want to get my offline data in order. But something that a lot of folks forget about is, how do you create a portrait of all of your digital data, especially in retail, where you generally are striving to get that authentication, that authenticated user, that login, right? And they generally tend to think of these pseudonymous first-party data strategies later. I actually always say, and the frameworks exist today. I've been doing this for a couple clients myself right now. This is probably going to be a heady topic, but like I like to go into this anyways, is this concept of first-party durable identity. All right. So imagine the very first time I touch a website or a mobile app, I, as the brand, am seeking to set a first party data collection strategy in an unknown state. So I'm not using some third party technology. I'm doing it first party. Well, if you think about what is allowable in the world today, the first party identifier can persist for 10, 15, 20 years. So imagine at every touch point in the journey, you're starting to collect all of these behavioral characteristics tied to an unknown individual, but then you capture that authentication and you start doing your zero party data acquisition. You're now starting to strengthen the connective tissue in the web of webs of the things that people do, right?
Right.
And there's perfectly legitimate because it is a first party value exchange and a first party consent that you as the brand are acquiring from the user. So now does it start sounding to come together how you can actually get to that serendipity and that personalization? You're connecting those online signals with the offline signals, the unknown signals to the known signals. You're doing it in a privacy safe, compliant way. You're protecting user data. You're not doing anything shady and kludgy, right? And now you can actually start thinking about, well, how do I want to apply those experiences at scale across my own operated paid strategies, even my offline strategies, digital kiosks inside of stores and stuff like that. So
Great. And so,
that's kind of like,
yeah, no, that's a thank you for that elaborate explanation of where we've come to today. So, as brands face this cookie deprecation and loss of signal data, what are some of the solutions that you've seen out there in terms of persistent identifiers to help, bring everyone together?
yeah. So what I really, what I generally recommend is to go with a server side data collection framework where I, as the brand, am actually setting the data collection framework in my first party domain. So essentially, if you think of tag management for all intents and purposes, right? There are some platforms out there that'll basically be like, I've created a structure for you to do it so you don't have to build it from scratch. And I'm giving you the option if you want to host it yourself. Doing this, I think, is probably the most durable way of doing it because it is truly first party collection, right? I have the payload sitting inside of my load balancers. They're inside of my CDN or behind my CDN. I'm deploying the tag payload in the headers, right? I'm doing that first party collection. It's the first call that I'm doing. And then I let that data go downstream into my analytics tools and my segmentation tools, and my analytical tools. There are kind of like some temporary stop gaps. I call them temporary. I think eventually Safari and even Chrome, with what Chrome is going to do in the Chrome browser, by having this opt out, the opt out I think may actually be a little bit more aggressive than ITP, right? Because it's just that Google web of logins. I see that with Privacy Sandbox. Like it's gonna be hard for people to contend with, right? But there is kind of a mid ground where you can do like reverse proxy with a third party payload. I don't personally love it, but it's kind of like if you don't have the engineering maturity, and if you don't have the structure to manage all of that infrastructure internally, there are ways that you can go to the edge of the net and basically do some repointing so that you are taking on the responsibility of that first party collection. You're just not maintaining the actual payload. But truly, like, and I know this is a very heady topic, but like, it's literally bringing it under the cloak, not should I say the cloak, under the umbrella of my actual physical infrastructure. So similar to how if I have a CRM, a CDP, I'm actually doing my first party data collection. I'm storing that first party data in my cloud of choice that I own or that I'm paying for, I'm licensing. That's how I also believe that the data collection in this anonymous way should be working. There are some middle grounds to kind of help you get from there to here today quickly with that reverse proxying. But these are all things that I tell brands that you really should think about because, again, it comes back down to it's all fine and dandy if you already know who the person is and you want to start collecting data on them after you know who they are.
Right.
But imagine how long does it take for a retailer or an e-commerce brand for that matter to actually get somebody to go from window shopping to actually purchasing something. That can be, in some cases, brands have repeat shoppers only 12 months. It can be 12 months apart depending on what you're buying. So being able to start that journey from that first touch point, and then creating this digital identity and this digital journey that lasts and persists until you get the authentication, and then a repeat authentication and a repeat authentication, allows you truly to build a true portrait analysis of not only the first party users that come to your site, but the first party users that you aggregate into cohorts or segments.
Great. And so once a brand has figured out their data collection strategy, how do you see the role of data clean rooms? And are there any recent examples where you've applied some of these techniques?
Yeah, so the biggest pain point that I'm going to just throw it out here, because somebody's going to be watching this or watching this vlog or listening to this podcast and basically be like, you had to go there, didn't you, Dio? But it's just blunt, right? I spent a lot of money on TikTok. I spent a lot of money on Snapchat. I spent a lot of money on Google, and I spent a lot of money on Meta. Makes up 80% of my media share. How do I do a cross-publisher analysis in that environment? I mean, you can't. It's like these different publishers aren't in a place, at least as of yesterday, where they're going to openly say, yeah, you can actually measure your Snap ads against your Meta ads, against your Pinterest ads. Like, put them all together and just measure them, right? So as practitioners, we've had to come to our clients and say, there's a way of doing MTA and backing that into your MMM. It's a little harder. Well, it's a lot harder, right? Whereby you're taking all your first party data signals, the ones that you own. So maybe it's from email marketing, direct mail campaigns, online acquisition, mobile acquisition. That's data signals that you have collected, right? Separately, maybe you're running ads on the Trade Desk or Stack Adapt, and you actually have the first party raw events that you can pull back that have user IDs. So now I've got this half of the picture of like the open web or the owned web, right? Now I have to back in how is it that the walled gardens are performing in this whole mix. And if you think about traditional MTA when you're doing with television, right? What's the first natural thing that you would do, Sonny? You'd build a model, right? Perhaps it's a Markov chain, and you're training this model to say, if in this hypothetical world, if I have this many units of this number of GRPs in market versus this number of GRPs in market, am I going to really affect the acquisition strategy against the data that I actually know that I have because it's my own consented data? You now have to apply that whole methodology with the walled garden. So like, I'm spending this much at YouTube in this interval and this frequency. Let's overlap that with Instagram Reel ads that I'm running, and then the next and the next and the next Snap ads, etc. And you're basically creating series of models, and you're training those models to basically say, okay, I think this is what a balance could be. And then you test and deploy, you do your next MMM, you make incremental changes, and you see how did that affect conversion. That actually is a big step forward because a lot of folks are struggling with just that alone. But separate and aside, there is the concept of a third-party data clean room in a multi-party collaboration. And I am aware of things that are happening out in the marketplace now that you'll start seeing come online in the next 3 to 4 months, where there are a handful of publishers and a handful of brands that have come together, and they've said, we'll allow for cross-publisher overlapping of data as long as the user level data is never exposed. Because Pub A and Pub B don't necessarily want you to basically say, oh, this is Sunny in here and Sunny in here, and this is what she's doing in each. I mean, that goes against just a business model, let alone a privacy and a compliance model. But you mentioned data clean rooms. I mean, data clean rooms, they exist now. People are already out there running tests, even at scale, with platforms like Habu and Samuha. There's also Infosum out there if you want to talk about true bunkers. And then you've got publishers that are pushing out their own proprietary clean rooms like Roku and Disney Plus on Snowflake. Imagine if you get to a point where a third-party independent clean room that I've mentioned in this call essentially allows you for an environment where I can connect multiple publishers and multiple brands together, and there's never any data movement, right? So like those emails, phones, mailing addresses, those are never shared, but essentially you're securely connecting these types of touch points so that I can actually see how my media impressions on XYZ publisher and XYZ publisher with, let's say, my retail media client who's actually buying inventory on my own properties. Like, you can actually do this kind of in-depth analysis to see, like, What was this optimal reach frequency? What was my 14-day attribution window look like? And now starting to see this in a true new version of MTA that is less reliant on models and it's more reliant on the actual data and the signals that are out there, with no data movement. I think that's just really like the wave of the future.
That's fantastic. A great opportunity for data visualization and dashboarding to see real-time cross correlation of different publishers.
Yep.
So just as a final question, Dio, what would you like to see happen with the industry to help move forward in resolving some of these challenges? I mean, you addressed a little bit about the publisher consortiums to try to collaborate better. Is there anything else that you kind of see as the holy grail for where we should be heading to?
Well, I mean, I'm really optimistic that between IAB, WFA, ANA, they're now becoming very vocal and saying like, publishers, brands, everybody, you all need to align on a common framework because you can't have Pub A doing one thing and Pub B doing another thing and Pub C doing another thing. We don't live in a day anymore where we can go to one third-party currency and leverage one third-party currency. I think you know which one I'm talking about. Like it just doesn't, the world doesn't exist that way. I mean, if you think about it, this year was the final year where TV ads made up less of the ad mix than any other form of media, only 22% of media. So it's like if you're in a purely digitized world, you can't rely on a traditional currency anymore. So I'm really optimistic. Some of the things that I've already talked about in here are going to come to fruition, where in 2025, you're going to have some of the biggest walled gardens come together and agree that there will be some form of collaboration in a third-party clean room that'll allow brands who spend a lot of money, quite honestly, to actually have a uniform method of performing the analysis. I think that's fair, because as long as the data is not being exposed from any side, from both brand and publisher, and you're still able to do meaningful analysis, I think that's like the step in the right direction. On the same note, what I am hoping for is I am hoping that whatever Google does roll out in Chromium, I really hope they don't try and take a truly Google-centric approach. And they'll come in line and say, like, look, we're going to make something at parity with ITP and ATT. You've already got Safari and Firefox and others like DuckDuckGo and some of these others that are doing it in that way anyways. So I think that would be kind of like the Zen. So from like end to end, from both the data collection side to the data measurement side, we have some uniform patterns. So you're not constantly trying to create something custom per brand, per advertiser, per publisher.
And really to be an enabler of solving some of the customer pain points that we know the biggest brands have to face all the time.
Yep.
So thank you so much. That was really comprehensive. And I hope that you tune in again to see our next episode of Culture by Numbers.
Thank you for having me.